Welcome to the channel English Epics. 15 years, and it's all over. All right, just a couple more things to do, and then I'm heading home for the weekend. God, what an exhausting day. Gotta prep and send out the outgoing mail and stock up at the liquor store. That's how I spend my time these days. Work to keep my mind off her, then drink until I black out. Given that last statement, you might assume I'm your typical alcoholic. Maybe. But is it typical to start drinking heavily at 40? I lived my life up to this point without needing to drown myself in booze. Damn it. Now I need a goddamn wheelchair just to get through the day. My life derailed like a runaway train, and all my so-called friends could have stopped it. But they did absolutely nothing to prevent this damn wreck. Well, to hell with them. I don't need friends like that anyway. We'll get along just fine if they keep me in the dark like they always have. You know what? I think it'd be better if we just stopped talking altogether. Any one of them, for God's sake, could have stopped my marriage from falling apart, but instead, they just stood there with their heads shoved up each other's asses. They were all around me after Janet left. Every single one of them. I got tired of hearing their crap about how they just didn't want to interfere. They all told me I should have seen it coming because apparently it was so obvious to everyone. Looks like I was the only person in town who didn't know a damn thing. So they can all kiss my ass. How do you realize that your wife, the woman you've been with for 15 years, is falling in love with another man and leaving you if you're as blind with love and trust as I was? It was unthinkable. I would never have seen it coming in a million years. Hell, I still don't believe it. I trusted her, and I gave her everything I possibly could. Looking back, the only fault I can admit to is that I didn't stop it when I had the chance. But how do you stop something you simply can't see? We had a great life. Most people have at least a few things they'd like to change about their lives, but not me. At least not until that bastard Brad moved in next door. You've probably met guys like him, a little younger than you, looks a little better than you. A smooth-talking, charming idiot, the kind of guy every husband worries about when he's around their wife. But I, old blind Mike, didn't even think about it. Janet had never done anything to hurt me. I didn't like Brad from the moment I laid eyes on him, but I still never saw him as a threat. I loved my wife as much as any man could love a woman, and I had no reason to believe Janet loved me any less. Our life was the kind they write fairy tales about, though now it feels more like a horror story. I can't even pinpoint the exact reason she left. Janet just told me she was leaving me for Brad, and then she was gone. Just like that. No explanation, no apologies, no goodbyes. Neighbors said they had seen them together, though no one seemed to know the real details. And now I've got some real problems. When I think about our marriage, no other reason comes to mind except sex. But even that doesn't make sense to me. We had a good sex life. Never had any problems in that department. We were always honest with each other about what we liked and what we didn't. Our time together was a huge part of our lives since we didn't have kids. Even after all the years we were married, we were still making love several times a week. I never saw any signs that her love for me had changed. She just walked out of our home a few weeks ago for Brad. I didn't chase after Janet, hoping she would at least tell me why. But I haven't heard a single word from her since, not even divorce papers. I understand that it's over between us, but I wanted to know why. What changed between us? Nothing out of the usual crap I could see had anything to do with us. When I woke up on Sunday morning, I seriously considered calling 911. God, why does a person put themselves through this kind of torment? I finally understood why I had never been much of a drinker before. I was dealing with a brutal alcohol hangover on top of the hangover from my wife leaving me. It was insanity. No one deserves to feel this much pain. Right then and there, I decided I wasn't going to let Janet destroy what was left of my life. By evening, I no longer wanted to die. I gathered every last bottle scattered around the house and dumped them in the trash as quietly as I could. This was my version of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, a new 3-step program. Step 1, stop drinking. Step 2, Forgive myself for the pain I had inflicted on myself. Step 3. Forget why Janet left me. Every single why went into the trash along with the booze. Hell, I didn't need 12 steps when 3 worked just fine. Over the next week, spent sober, I had plenty of time to make decisions about my marriage with Janet. It became crystal clear. I could no longer tolerate what she had done. She and Brad were going to pay for my pain and anger, and they wouldn't even see it coming. I decided to wait until everything settled down. My only immediate actions at that moment were to protect all my financial assets. I contacted my bank and transferred the majority of my funds to an account in another bank under my name only. I canceled our joint credit cards, cashed out my CDS insurance. You get the idea. If I hadn't acted quickly and luck hadn't been on my side, I would have been completely broke in about a month. I put the house up for sale, giving the realtor instructions to expedite the process. I made the decision to move all my money out of the country as soon as possible. This had to be done before Janet filed for divorce and froze all my assets. Everything I was doing was strictly legal, but I had no intention of staying around to answer any questions. For now, my ex-wife was unknowingly playing right into my hands. My lawyer was a good friend. Richard had handled several cases for me in the past. I explained to him that I needed to prepare divorce papers. When I told him about my situation, I only gave him the necessary details. He advised me to hold on to the documents until I actually needed them. There was no immediate urgency yet. I tried to stay as unnoticed as possible. I changed all the locks in the house and switched my phone numbers. I gave strict instructions. At work, not to accept any calls from Janet. It might seem like a silly move, but I needed to make it as difficult as possible for her to contact me. Janet and I had well-paying jobs, and since we didn't have kids, we managed to save up a decent amount of money. The house sold much faster than I had even hoped. It took just over a month. Now I was living in a crappy little apartment near work. I had managed to stash away nearly $1, $2 million in a bank account in the Cayman Islands, and I felt like I could disappear and live quite comfortably on the funds available to me. I hadn't touched my retirement accounts yet, putting that off for later. Janet had a very delicate government job that required a high-level security clearance. The pay was good, but her government pension wouldn't be accessible for another 15 years. As far as I knew, she had no other financial support besides her salary and that idiot Brad. On Friday, I invited a few guys from work to have drinks with me. No, I wasn't drinking again. I needed to be at the bar Brad frequented for my plan to work. I just wanted to create the illusion of being drunk. There were 5 of us that night. The only reason I invited them was to have an excuse to be in that pub. We ordered beer, and my plan was set in motion. Right on schedule, that loudmouth bastard showed up after work. He didn't notice me right away. When he was finishing his second drink, I sent him another one. The bartender handed it to Brad, explaining where it came from. When he looked across the bar and recognized me, I raised my beer in a toast to him, then turned back to my friends and continued our conversation. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming truck. I watched his reflection in the mirror as he struggled to process what the hell had just happened. I didn't look at him again. It was crucial that he didn't see any aggression from me. To be honest, I could barely resist the urge to go over there and beat the living crap out of that son of a bitch. But that would have ruined all my chances for revenge. I fought against it with everything I had, telling myself, just hold on and let him do all the work for you. I kept up the game for the next few days. Every evening, I went to that bar. And almost every evening, he was there with the same confused look on his face. It was obvious that the thought of me being there, seemingly ignoring him completely, was eating him alive. What a narcissistic prick. I was counting on him making the first move, and I wasn't wrong. He couldn't stay away. Less than a week later, his curiosity got the best of him, and he approached me. Hey, Mike, I just want you to know that this wasn't personal and it wasn't planned. You know, it just kind of happened. And Well, anyway, I raised my hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. Not personal. You stole my wife and you don't think that's personal? I thought. It's all good, Brad. Don't worry about it. Hey, bartender, can we get a couple of good drinks over here? Man, you're taking this surprisingly well, he said as fresh glasses appeared in front of us. Honestly, I'm glad to be rid of her. She was never exactly the wife of my dreams, I said, raising my glass and ordering 2 more. Really? You know, I never took you for this kind of guy. You never drank at any of the neighborhood parties. Well, Brad, I couldn't drink back then. Before I married Janet, I drank like a fish. But one night I came home late and blacked out right away. When I woke up the next morning, my whole body was covered in bruises. Took me a few more times to finally figure out what was happening. One night I pretended to be drunk when I got home. That's when I found out Janet was beating me with a rolling pin whenever I came home drunk. You're joking, right? Janet would never do something like that. Exactly. She doesn't do that to me anymore. Imagine that, I said, finishing my drink. Then I steered Brad into a random conversation about his job, shifting the focus away from Janet. After a few more rounds, Brad got up to head to the men's room to make room for the next beer. I emptied the pills into his half-finished drink. It took only about 15 minutes to get him exactly where I needed him to be. I had sobered up enough to drive the unconscious Brad home, delivering a few well-placed punches to his kidneys and back along the way. As quietly as possible, I dropped him off at his doorstep and drove back to my place. I just wished I could be a fly on the wall when he woke up. The next day, I called Janet at work. She sounded extremely cautious about my call. I wasn't yelling or raging, and that clearly caught her off guard. I told her that I had some urgent matters to handle at the moment, but would like to meet in the next few weeks to discuss the division of our assets. I had no intention of giving her anything, but I needed a reason to pass along my new mobile number without raising suspicion. For a while, we spoke like old friends. I'm sorry, Mike. I really didn't think it would turn out like this. Hey, I get it, Janet. I don't want you to worry about it. I was so afraid to talk to you after. Please, Janet, don't. It's fine. I'm fine. You're happy, and that's enough. But, Mike, I should have. Janet, listen. I've got to go. I'll call you in a couple of weeks. I heard her crying as I hung up. Yeah, she felt guilty. Perfect. Janet felt awful about how she had treated me, and Brad thought I was his new best friend. Everything was falling into place exactly as I needed it to. That evening, I arrived at the pub a little later than usual. After all, the groundwork had already been laid. Brad was already halfway drunk by the time I got there. I walked up and clapped him on the back, right in the same spot I had hit the night before. "How's it going, Brad?" I asked as he flinched from my touch. "I've had better days, Mike. A little hair of the dog, Brad? Yeah, I probably overdid it last night. I don't even remember going home. You were pretty wasted. I helped you into a cab. That explains why my car was still here this morning." He paused, then suddenly blurted out, "Mike, when Janet used to beat you, did you ever do anything about it?" "Yeah, I quit drinking." "You mean you just let her get away with it?" "What the hell was I supposed to do? Call the cops?" "She was my wife, or at least I thought she was. I couldn't do that, so I stopped drinking." "I see your point. Brad, is she hitting you?" "Oh no, just curious." "Bartender, drinks for the both of us," I said. Tonight's setup was exactly the same as the night before. The only difference? The rolling pin. If there was one thing I could say with certainty about Janet, it was her love for baking pies. Back in the day, her grandmother had taught her how to bake, and there was never a time when we didn't have at least a slice of pie in the house. She always used an old French rolling pin, a gift from her grandmother. And earlier today, I had bought an identical one from a cookware shop. I could still picture Janet holding it in her hands, and I'd bet anything that Brad had seen her with it just as often. I didn't go all out on Brad, but I did enough to leave bruises that would ache for at least a week. I was careful, not breaking any bones, but I made sure he had no doubts about what he thought had happened. By now, the idea that Janet was beating him had firmly taken root in his mind. A few days later, I found Brad in his usual spot at the pub. This time, he was sipping on a soda. "Hey, Brad, what's with the soft drinks? You on meds or something?" "Nah, just trying to cut back a little." "How have you been?" "Never better. You know, I really should thank you for taking that witch off my hands. I haven't had this much fun in years." "Seriously, Mike?" "Hell yeah. Last night I had sex for the first time in 5 years. Man, it was amazing." "You're kidding, right? You're standing here telling me that you and Janet haven't had sex in 5 years?" "Yep. That's exactly what I'm saying. It was fine for the first year or two, and then I had to start begging for it. After a while, I got so fed up with that crap that I just started handling things myself. You know what I mean? I could practically see the gears turning in his head as he processed my little confession. This was coming together so perfectly, I still couldn't believe it. At this rate, I figured I could probably get him to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge in 2 weeks, and he'd send me a thank you note afterward. I ordered 2 triple whiskeys with a tequila chaser. I needed to get this idiot drunk. "Come on, Brad. Let's celebrate the end of my celibacy." "I don't know if that's a good idea, Mike. I've been drinking a lot lately." "Come on, kitten. Drink up." It worked. I knew he couldn't resist a challenge and would take the bait. He downed the whiskey and immediately followed it with the tequila. I grabbed my glass and headed to the men's room. Inside, I poured the entire thing into the urinal, took a piss and flushed. Brad did the same, and by the time I got back, the next round was already waiting for me. An hour later, the guy could barely walk. It wasn't easy for me either, but I had managed to drink almost everything that was meant for me. I almost felt sorry for the bastard. Almost. I worked him over with my rolling pin for a good 5 minutes. He wouldn't be forgetting this beating anytime soon, and he'd be blaming Janet for every bit of it. I was playing Brad like an old, familiar violin. The morning was bright and sunny. Even if Janet somehow got away with beating Brad, just the thought of it made me laugh. He had taken the bait, hook, line, and sinker. And either way, I was leaving soon. My phone rang. It was Janet. She was using her one phone call from jail to talk to me. Why me? It was hard to understand her through the sobbing. "Mike, I have no one else to call. Janet, my God, what's going on? Are you okay?" "Mike, they arrested me." Brad came home completely drunk and passed out right at the front door. When he woke up this morning, he was screaming like a lunatic, accusing me of beating him. "Well, did you? How can you even ask me that? You know me. I would never do something like that. A long time ago, I thought I knew you." "Yes, I deserve this, Mike, but I need your help. Please. I have no one else to turn to. None of my friends want anything to do with me anymore after, well, you know." "What are they charging you with? Domestic violence and possibly assault." "Jesus, Janet, you're definitely going to lose your job over this. You do realize that now that you've been arrested, there's no way you'll keep your security clearance, right? This is really bad. What exactly do you want me to do? Can you come and bail me out? I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I'm in deep shit. I need to get out and sort this whole mess out. You know, Janet, I'd really love to help you, but I'm not in town. If I ask Richard to step in, will that help?" "That would be amazing, Mike. I could never repay you for this." She was right about that. If she couldn't find me, she sure as hell couldn't repay me. On my way to the airport, I called Richard and asked him to serve Janet with the divorce papers at the county jail. I don't think I stopped smiling the entire way to Miami. I left Janet with a grand total of $1,500, the amount still sitting in our shared bank account, $100 for every year we were married. A few days later, after a whole lot of currency exchanges, I left the Caymans, lying on the beach with a Diet Pepsi in hand. I wondered how long they had kept Janet in jail. Well, whatever. I'd ask Richard when I told him where to send the finalized divorce decree. I was sure it would be to a P.O. box at least 10,000 miles from wherever I was now. Anyway, I've got to go. My pies should be ready to come out of the oven. Oh yeah, I kept the rolling pin as a souvenir to remind me of the good times I had with my best buddy Brad. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of English Epics. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.